After a year spent fully on board the Khamzat Chimaev hype train, fans of this undefeated Chechen will finally have the chance to see just how good he is, as he takes a major step up in competition in the form of the number 2 ranked Gilbert Burns. And for this video, we're going to check in with some of the sport's most recognizable faces to see how they see this welterweight contest playing out. This is UFC Fighters Predict Khamzat vs. Burns. Kamaru Usman. The welterweight champion of the world, Kamaru Usman, is a man who will have some added interest in this UFC 273 showdown. Chances are that the winner will book their shot at the title if they manage to take home the victory in impressive fashion. And given that Usman has just went through his second consecutive rematch, it makes sense that he will be more excited to welcome some fresh blood to the cage. Leon Edwards will, of course, be first, but with an eye on Khamzat vs. Burns, Usman could well be looking at a marquee matchup if Chimaev is successful. But for the Nigerian nightmare, his time spent training with Gilbert before his rise to his position as champion makes him think that the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist will be too much for the Chechen when fight night rolls out. He would relish the prospect of welcoming Chimaev to the cage. That type of fighter would draw some pretty huge numbers, far greater numbers in fact than a fight with Edwards, Burns, or even a trilogy with Colby. For Usman, who is of course the pound-for-pound king right now, a victory over Khamzat would no doubt leave him with dollar signs in his eyes.
It's a great matchup. And winner of that, I might see him in the future. I'm gonna say that's an intriguing fight. Both guys have very imposing styles. That one I'll be watched closely as well. But of course, I gotta go with my guy Gilbert.
Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley's podcast gives him a regular platform to speak his mind on the general happenings within the world of MMA. And over the months, he has made it clear that he is most certainly a fan of Khamzat Chimaev. However, given that he had his first-hand experience with Gilbert Burns, thanks to them sharing a spot on Team UFC during the Quintet Ultra Grappling Tournament, Sugar Sean knows exactly how dangerous it could be for Khamzat if he takes Burns down to the mat and is out of his depth with the former title challenger's legendary jiu-jitsu skills. From there, he went on to make probably the most outlandish prediction of the lot, that Conor McGregor is going to come back and defeat not only Khamzat, but also Colby Covington and the champion Kamaru Usman. If you want to talk about wild takes, this certainly is one of the biggest left field picks of the year so far, that's for sure. As a striker himself, it makes sense that O'Malley has a lot of faith in Conor's abilities. But man, has he seen Usman fight?
Just to see if Khamzat's the real
This
deal.
is the real deal fight. If he beats Gilbert Burns, and if he beats him with ease, I just don't see it. I just can't. I don't know. I
If
like
he beats him with
Gilbert.
ease-
We were on the same grappling team, dude.
Yeah, you guys
UFC
are
Quintet.
same
We're like this, dude.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch the fight. I think Khamzat versus Usman, if he's as good as like boom, he does beat Gilbert. Boom, I think that's a very interesting fight.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I don't know when
There's
that
one
is.
man though that can take all those fuckers out.
Who?
Conor McGregor.
Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling, out of everyone featured on the UFC 273 lineup, probably has the biggest point to prove, with his status as the bantamweight champion of the world being largely laughed off due to the circumstances that saw him crowned champion. And as far as his take on Khamzat is concerned, Aljo has been just as impressed as the rest of us with his progress so far, especially with how easily Boris was able to deal with this setup and competition that Li Jingliang offered. But with that being said, Sterling is still realistic about just how dangerous a matchup Burns will be, given his incredible BJJ credentials. In the eyes of the bantamweight champion, Khamzat could well be tested this time around. And one way or another, this fight will be the perfect stage for us to learn a lot more about Chimaev. While he wouldn't give an exact pick, his framing of the fight was definitely an interesting perspective.
Khamzat is a phenom. I mean, look what he's doing, everybody. The way he handled the leech, just picked him up and kind of carried him over while he's still holding him, talking to Dana, and then slams him down and pretty much shortly after that chokes him out. He's done that time and time again. I do think that's what makes him dangerous. He has a very long, lanky frame. He's explosive, quick twitch muscles, and he has the grappling to go with it. Maybe not like Gilbert Burns in terms of like the jiu-jitsu realm. And I do think that's going to be the difference in this fight. I think he's going to actually get a little bit tested with his overall grappling, not just the wrestling department, because Gilbert can wrestle. We know he has good jiu-jitsu off of his back. The one thing I would say about Gilbert, he tends to slow down, as we saw in the Usman fight. But with Woodley, he went 25 minutes, no problem. So that makes me wonder if it was just the heat of the moment, or are we going to be able to see him a little bit more controlled and poised and being able to have that same energy expenditure for the entire 15 minutes as opposed to 25. So I think that could be a big difference.
Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski has made a name for himself as one of the most technically masterful guys in the sport. It really does take a lot to go 10 extremely competitive rounds with Max Holloway. And slowly, people are starting to understand just how special this guy is, especially after his dominant victory over Brian Ortega. Volk is definitely a great mind for the sport, and as far as his take on Khamzat versus Burns goes, he understands just how much weight is on Chimaev's shoulders thanks to the crazy levels of hype that surrounds him. The question for Volkanovski is how close to our expectations his real levels are. Gilbert Burns is exactly the type of fighter who will catch him out if he's not up to par. But even still, the UFC featherweight champ is picking Chimaev to show up in a big way, calling him the real deal and backing him to dominate. Volk seems to be right on board the Khamzat hype train. He will defend his 145-pound crown against Chang Sung-Yung in the event's #1 build fight, with Sterling versus Yan in the co-main. UFC 273 is pretty damn stacked, that's for sure.
I think Chimaev is going to go, and I still think it'll shock. Obviously, he's got a lot of hype, so people that don't really know the sport are expecting him to win. But people that really do know the sport are probably, oh yeah, Burns on the ground, you know, world champion, like, you know, they'll be surprised if Chimaev goes out there and just mauls him, and I feel like that's what's going to happen. I feel like that is where Chimaev is at right now. I think he's actually going to go out there and show some dominant performance, which is going to be pretty incredible against someone like Burns. So if he goes out there and does that, I think he's a real deal. But that will really make everyone be like, oh damn, this guy's a real deal. So that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting Chimaev to go out there and dominate.
Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Yuri Prochazka. Ask any MMA fan to give you a list of their 5 most anticipated rising contenders, and you're sure to see the names Khamzat Chimaev and Yuri Prochazka quite regularly. As another major breakout star from the year 2021, Prochazka's own title shot at UFC Gold has been set, with him scheduled to take on Glover Teixeira next time around. Already, people are talking about Yuri as one of the most exciting fighters in the game, a potential superstar who is just waiting to break out. Sounds familiar? Well, the lightweight contender is also a fan of his fellow budding superstar Khamzat, and he seems confident in backing him to show up in a big way at UFC 273. The test that lies before Chimaev is indeed a tough one, but according to Yuri, it's a test that he expects the Chechen to pass with flying colors. And who knows, Khamzat is a dude who is crazy enough to make it clear that he sees 205 pounds in his future, so perhaps down the line these two fighters could even share the cage. If there's any fighter in the UFC right now who could become a 3-division champion, you'd best believe that Khamzat is on that list.
Khamzat is now on the winning wave, and I think he will be the better in this fight.
Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping has always been reliable to set the table when it comes to previewing any of the UFC upcoming fights. After a long and successful career in the top flight, the Count has seen and done it all inside the octagon. And through his weekly podcast, he's able to share some of his insights into the fight game. And what's interesting about this take is that, while of course he, like most of us, gives the out-and-out grappling edge to Burns, Bisping can't help but wonder whether Gilbert will actually be the one to instigate the takedown. And it makes sense. Burns, especially if he can put Khamzat on his back, can really start to threaten with submissions and perhaps some ground and pound of his own. Like many strong top game users, the big question over Khamzat that he may have to answer at UFC 273 is just how comfortable he is off his back. And even if he manages to breeze through the fight with Burns without having to confront that possibility, you'd best believe that the champion Kamaru Usman is thinking the same thing. Bisping and Burns were both active during the same years through long periods of their career. And as an active fan of the sport, the former middleweight champ is all too familiar with just how devastating Gilbert can be with submissions. So as far as unique takes and predictions for this fight are concerned, the possibility of seeing Gilbert Burns shooting in for the takedown is definitely one to consider. Whether he will get the opportunity to do so against the fast start that is Khamzat is another question. But it's certainly an interesting thought, right?
Still, it's still the world of the jiu-jitsu guy if you hit the ground. And it's interesting because is Gilbert Burns going to take Khamzat down? He's probably not going to be able to. Listen, if you set up the takedowns with shots, then you can get in nice and deep, and you time it well, you can take people down. That's how I used my wrestling when I was fighting. I was never the best wrestler. Okay, so jiu-jitsu guys are really good on the ground, but they're not good at getting it there. Khamzat specializes in an art which puts people to the ground. You can also use that to stay on your feet. You can use it for anti-wrestling or to defend the takedowns. So I think Gilbert may struggle to get Khamzat down to the ground. And what happens then? If Khamzat doesn't want to take him down and Gilbert doesn't want to, or can't get him down, should I say, then they're going to fight on the feet.
Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns' reputation as a legendary BJJ practitioner might be the first thing that comes to mind when most fans think of him. But on top of that, this former welterweight title challenger is also very humble, thoughtful, and an intelligent man. So when he was asked by Helen Yee to give his prediction for this truly massive showdown, he was just about as honest as he can be. Although he definitely sees himself getting his hand raised by the end of the fight, Burns gives credit to Khamzat as someone who is more than capable of testing him, predicting that the fight will be an incredibly tough and difficult affair for both men. Whether the action is on the feet or on the mat, Gilbert doesn't see an easy route to victory against the rising star. And with that being the case, he has prepared himself for as much as 3 hard-fought rounds of action when the octagon doors close. I think we can speak for most fans when we say that any form of wrestling and grappling exchanges in this bout will be truly intriguing, an opinion that Burns himself seems to be quite open in sharing.
I see myself winning. I was for sure. I believe everyone that I'm fighting that I'm going to beat, that I'm going to win. But I see going very hard. I see, especially in the beginning, he might be very strong. I do believe he's going to strike a little bit, but I do believe he's going to grapple too. He's going to try to take me down, wrestle, stay heavy on top, good ground and pound. And that's what I think he's going to do. And I think I'll have a lot of answers to the game, take down defense, getting up, a lot of striking too. But I see a war. I don't think it's going to be easy for me. I don't think it'll be easy for him. I think we're going to grind down. It's going to be, I see my arms getting raised, but I think it's going to be a war.
Khamzat Chimaev. And finally, we come to the main attraction in this fight. If there has been one constant through Chimaev's career in the UFC so far, it has been his immense confidence. Whenever any name is thrown out there as a potential opponent, Khamzat's response is usually one that promises that he will emerge victorious and his adversary will be smashed and totally out of his depth. And though it is always fair to predict that the Chechen standout is going to come out with an incredible level of pace and intensity, this time around, it appears as though he will have some added motivation to make a real statement. According to Khamzat, he met with UFC President Dana White recently, and a promise was made that he would be given a title shot if he can run through Burns in a similar fashion to his other impressive victories. We all know about the stats, how Khamzat has absorbed just 2 significant strikes in 4 UFC bouts. And though Burns will offer a new level of challenge entirely, Khamzat appears to be ready to go out there and put a pace on him early. To keep his word to Dana, White himself has made it clear that the fans would be totally behind the idea of Khamzat getting a shot at Kamaru Usman's belt if he wins. And unless the fight is a total stinker, which is highly unlikely, it does seem as though Boris will have the chance to earn more than a win bonus when UFC 273 comes around.
I was sitting with Dana and me and Dana with dinner, eat dinner. And I said to him, what next for me when I finish that guy? He said, maybe title. He said, if I finish him that easy way, I do, with everybody. He said, people want to see only the fight for title. And he said, maybe I'll give you that chance.
And that will just about do it for this video. But how do you see this eagerly anticipated welterweight showdown playing out? Will it be the fearsome finisher Khamzat Chimaev or the experience and well-roundedness of Gilbert Burns? Again, if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.